What happens when a public figure long defined by their silence suddenly breaks their years of quiet? How does a single moment of speech shift the narrative and redefine a person's role in a turbulent world? For Melania Trump, the former First Lady who had remained largely in the background of her husband's political career, the decision to speak publicly was nothing short of a game-changer. Known for her reserved nature, Melania had spent much of her time out of the spotlight, allowing her husband's presidency and policies to take center stage. But when she stepped up to the microphone on that fateful evening, the world was forced to listen. Her message, one of unity and personal conviction, sent ripples through both the political sphere and the broader public, leaving everyone asking, what does this mean for her family, and for the future of American politics? How it shook the status quo, how Melania Trump's decision to break her silence shifted public perception, and what it says about her evolving role in the political narrative. Through her words and the reactions that followed, we'll uncover the lasting impact of her speech, the questions it raised, and the possibility of a new chapter in her public life. Before this, the world had grown accustomed to her silence, a quiet presence that spoke louder than words. Melania Trump, the former First Lady, had long been a figure of intrigue, a woman who captivated through her enigmatic demeanor. While her husband's presidency unfolded in a constant storm of media coverage and political discourse, Melania often stayed in the shadows, offering glimpses of her perspective through carefully curated appearances and rare statements. Over time, her silence became a defining feature, sparking speculation and countless narratives about the woman behind the stoic gaze. For years, this mystique fueled curiosity. Some saw her as a reluctant participant in the political circus, longing for a return to a private life. Others believed her silence was a calculated choice, a refusal to be drawn into the chaos. Whichever the case, her silence only deepened the intrigue. The world watched, speculated, and waited. But no one truly expected the silence to break. And yet, it did. It began with whispers. Reports surfaced of a planned public address, an appearance unlike any she had made before. Initial reactions were a mix of skepticism and disbelief. What could Melania possibly say that would warrant such an event? Pundits debated whether this was a strategic move by the Trump camp, a deliberate effort to reignite public interest as the election loomed closer. Still, the prospect of her speaking out stirred a kind of collective anticipation. For those who admired her, it was an opportunity to hear from a figure they saw as dignified and poised. For her critics, it was a chance to scrutinize her stance, and perhaps even her sincerity. The announcement was simple and understated, much like the woman herself. There would be no flashy rally or bombastic social media teasers. A venue was chosen, a space intimate enough to feel personal, yet grand enough to signify the weight of the moment. The buzz grew louder as the day approached, with journalists and analysts speculating on the content of her speech. Would she talk about her husband's political career? Address her time in the White House? Or was this something entirely different, a revelation about her personal journey? When the day arrived, the atmosphere was electric. Cameras panned across the room, capturing the expressions of those in attendance. Supporters, critics, and curious onlookers all sat in tense anticipation. It was a moment suspended in time, where the air felt heavy with the weight of the unknown. The stage, illuminated by soft lighting, seemed to echo the understated grandeur that Melania had come to embody. Then she appeared. Dressed in an elegant yet simple attire, she walked to the podium with the kind of grace that had always defined her public appearances. There was no hesitation in her steps, no sign of the reserved figure many had come to associate with her. As she took her place behind the microphone, the room fell silent, the kind of silence that amplifies every heartbeat, every intake of breath. Her opening words were calm yet commanding, her accent carrying the familiar lilt that had become synonymous with her voice. But it was when she shifted to the present that the real shockwaves began. Her words, carefully chosen, were direct yet profound. She addressed the challenges facing the nation with a clarity that seemed to cut through the noise. It wasn't a political manifesto, nor was it an emotional plea. Instead, it was a statement of intent, a declaration of her perspective on the issues that mattered most to her. She spoke of unity, resilience, and the need for empathy in a time of division. The audience, initially silent, began to react. Applause broke out in waves, punctuating her points as she continued. For some, it was a moment of vindication, proof that Melania was more than just a passive figure. For others, it was a revelation, a glimpse into the mind of a woman who had long been an enigma. When she finished, the room erupted in a standing ovation. But it wasn't just the applause that lingered. It was the sense that something significant had just occurred, a shift in the narrative surrounding Melania Trump. For the first time in years, she wasn't just a figure in the background. She was a voice, a presence, a force to be reckoned with. The reactions that followed were immediate and varied. Social media lit up with praise, criticism, and everything in between. Some hailed her as a symbol of grace and resilience, while others dismissed her speech as a calculated move to support her husband's ambitions. Analysts dissected her every word, debating its implications for the upcoming election and for her own legacy. But regardless of the opinions, one thing was clear. Melania Trump had broken her silence, and the world was listening. The speech may have ended, but the ripple effects had only just begun. As the audience filed out of the venue, conversations buzzed with interpretations of what they had just witnessed. In living rooms and newsrooms across the country, her words replayed in sound bites, each outlet emphasizing a different part of her address. The media frenzy was immediate, and for good reason. Melania Trump's public silence had, for so long, been a canvas onto which people projected their assumptions. Now that silence was replaced with a clear, deliberate message, leaving everyone scrambling to interpret its meaning. Across social media platforms, hashtags bearing her name trended for hours. Supporters called her speech a breath of fresh air, applauding her focus on unity and resilience. "Melania finally speaks," read one post, accompanied by clips of her poised delivery. For these individuals, the speech was not only a political statement but a personal one, a testament to her ability to command a stage in her own right. Others, however, were less impressed. Critics questioned the timing of her appearance, labeling it a calculated effort to humanize a controversial campaign. The debate was as polarized as the political climate itself, but no one could deny that Melania had seized the spotlight. Within hours, the speech became a staple of primetime commentary. Panel discussions dissected her tone, her choice of words, even her body language. Behavioral analysts pointed out how her posture conveyed confidence, while linguists noted the deliberate simplicity of her phrasing. "This was a departure from her usual reserved persona," one expert remarked. "It's clear that this was a carefully crafted moment, but there's an undeniable authenticity in how she delivered it." Others weren't so generous. A political strategist on a rival network dismissed the speech as style over substance, claiming it offered little in terms of concrete solutions. The debates extended beyond the airwaves. Around dinner tables and in coffee shops, people shared their thoughts on Melania's unexpected return to the public eye. What struck many was the duality of her message. It felt personal, yet political, reflective, yet forward-looking. For some, this ambiguity only added to her mystique. Was this speech a one-time event, or was it the beginning of a more active role in her husband's campaign? And perhaps more importantly, was it a step toward reclaiming her narrative independent of the Trump name? The days that followed offered no definitive answers, but they did provide a clearer picture of the impact her words had made. Within the Trump campaign, her speech was hailed as a triumph. Internal reports showed a noticeable uptick in enthusiasm among supporters, with many expressing hope that she would take on a larger role moving forward. Small-dollar donations spiked in the 48 hours after her address, and rally attendance surged as clips of her speech continued to circulate online. Even beyond her husband's base, the speech seemed to resonate in unexpected ways. Political analysts speculated that her measured tone and focus on unity could appeal to undecided voters, particularly suburban women who had grown weary of divisive rhetoric. "She's relatable in a way that's rare for figures in her position," one commentator observed. "There's something disarming about her approach. She's not trying to be a typical politician, and that's exactly why people are paying attention." But with praise came criticism, and it was as fierce as it was immediate. Critics accused her of opportunism, arguing that her sudden re-emergence was timed to distract from controversies surrounding the campaign. Where was this version of Melania when she was First Lady? One op-ed asked. Others questioned the sincerity of her message, pointing out what they saw as inconsistencies between her words and her actions. The scrutiny was relentless, a reminder of the unique challenges she faced as a public figure straddling the line between political spouse and private citizen. Amid this whirlwind of reactions, Melania remained characteristically silent. She made no follow-up statements, no public appearances to clarify or expand on her remarks. If anything, her absence only heightened the intrigue. It was as if she had delivered her message and then stepped back, allowing the world to make of it what it would. This approach, deliberate or not, only deepened the divide between those who saw her as a reluctant but sincere voice and those who viewed her as a calculated player in a broader political strategy. Behind the scenes, however, her impact was undeniable. Campaign insiders reported that her speech had injected a much-needed boost of energy into their efforts. Volunteers and staffers alike described a renewed sense of momentum, with many attributing it to her ability to connect with audiences on a more personal level than traditional political figures. She has a way of cutting through the noise, one campaign worker said. People listen to her because she doesn't overcomplicate things. She speaks from the heart. For many, this realization marked the beginning of a broader conversation about Melania Trump's role in the political and cultural landscape. Was this a fleeting moment, or the start of something more enduring? And what did it mean for a woman who had long been defined by her silence to finally speak? As these questions swirled, one thing became clear. Melania's voice, however infrequent, carried weight. And in a world saturated with noise, that rarity made it all the more powerful. The days turned into weeks, but the reverberations of Melania Trump's speech showed no signs of fading. It had become more than just a fleeting moment in the relentless churn of the news cycle. The speech had planted itself firmly in the public consciousness, sparking conversations that stretched far beyond the immediate political landscape. For many, it wasn't just the content of her words, but the very act of her speaking that carried the most significance. Melania's decision to break her silence wasn't simply a commentary on current issues, it was a statement about her place in the narrative. Political analysts and commentators couldn't help but return to the question, why now? After years of maintaining a carefully guarded public image, what had prompted her to step into the spotlight at such a pivotal moment? Some saw it as a masterstroke of timing, a calculated effort to sway critical demographics as the election approached. Others believed it was a deeply personal decision, born out of a desire to address misconceptions and reclaim her voice after years of being overshadowed. The answer likely lay somewhere in between. Insiders close to the Trump family suggested that Melania's re-emergence had been months in the making, with careful planning and preparation behind the scenes. They described her as deeply thoughtful, unwilling to speak until she felt she had something meaningful to say. Her speech, they claimed, was less about politics and more about her values, family, resilience, and a belief in the strength of the American spirit. Yet even this framing couldn't escape the political implications. In a climate as polarized as this, any public statement by someone in her position was bound to be scrutinized through a political lens. Meanwhile, her absence from the public eye following the speech only fueled further speculation. Unlike her husband, who thrived on constant visibility and engagement, Melania seemed content to let the moment stand on its own. This stark contrast added another layer of intrigue to her persona. Where Donald Trump wielded his voice as a tool of persuasion and provocation, Melania's silence became her own form of power, a deliberate withholding that compelled people to pay closer attention when she did choose to speak. For supporters, this approach only heightened their admiration. Many saw her as a symbol of quiet strength, someone who understood the value of restraint in an era dominated by noise. They pointed to her ability to command a room without theatrics, to connect with people on a human level, even as she maintained a certain distance. "She's not trying to be something she's not," one supporter said during a televised panel discussion. "That's what makes her so refreshing. She's authentic in a way that a lot of political figures just aren't." Critics, however, were quick to challenge this narrative. They argued that her silence was less about strategy and more about avoidance. a reluctance to engage with the difficult questions surrounding her husband's policies and controversies. Some went further, accusing her of complicity by association, suggesting that her speech was an attempt to deflect attention from the campaign's challenges rather than address them head-on. "It's easy to talk about unity and resilience," one op-ed stated. "It's harder to reconcile those ideals with the actions of the administration she stood by." Amid these debates, one undeniable truth emerged. Melania Trump had become a focal point in her own right. Whether admired or criticized, she was no longer merely a supporting character in her husband's political saga. Her speech had elevated her to a position where her words, and even her silences, carried weight. This shift was particularly evident in how voters responded. Polls conducted in the weeks following her address showed a noticeable change in perceptions of the Trump family. Among undecided voters, particularly women, there was a slight but significant uptick in favorability, with many citing Melania's speech as a reason for their softened stance. This newfound influence wasn't lost on the campaign. Behind the scenes, discussions were underway about how to build on the momentum she had generated. Some advisors pushed for more appearances, arguing that her relatability and measured tone could help broaden the campaign's appeal. Others cautioned against overexposure, warning that part of her power lay in her scarcity, that the more she spoke, the more she risked losing the mystique that had captivated so many. For her part, Melania remained silent on the matter. Those close to her described her as unwavering in her belief that actions, not appearances, were what truly mattered. "She's not interested in playing the political game," one insider revealed. "She'll speak when she feels it's necessary, but she's not going to let anyone dictate her narrative. That's always been her way." This refusal to conform to expectations only deepened the divide between her admirers and her detractors. To some, it was evidence of her independence, proof that she wasn't merely a political pawn. To others, it was a frustrating lack of accountability, a missed opportunity to engage more directly with the issues at hand. Yet, despite the polarized reactions, one thing was becoming increasingly clear. Melania Trump's role in the campaign and in the broader cultural narrative was evolving. She was no longer defined solely by her relationship to her husband or her position as a former First Lady. Instead, she was carving out a space that was uniquely her own, a blend of personal authenticity and strategic ambiguity that defied easy categorization. As the campaign trail heated up, questions linger about what her next move would be. Would she continue to shape the conversation through rare but impactful appearances? Or would she step back into the shadows, content to let her speech speak for itself? And how would this delicate balance between visibility and mystery influence the final stages of the election? What was undeniable, however, was that Melania had shattered the assumptions surrounding her. She had shown the world a different side of herself, one that was thoughtful, composed, and willing to engage on her own terms. For a figure who had long been defined by her silence, this was no small feat. And as the weeks unfolded, the impact of that transformation continued to ripple outward, shaping not just the narrative of the campaign, but the public's understanding of who she was and who she could become. The transformation was undeniable, and its resonance extended far beyond political circles. For many, Melania Trump's speech wasn't just a moment of political theater, it was a reflection of something deeper. It spoke to a woman who had, for years, been underestimated, her silence interpreted as passivity, her public image reduced to a collection of stoic expressions and carefully chosen appearances. But now her voice had broken through, and with it came a sense of agency that surprised even her staunchest critics. For those who had followed her journey closely, this moment didn't come out of nowhere. It was the culmination of years spent navigating one of the most scrutinized roles in the world while staying true to a core sense of self. From her early days as a model in Slovenia to her years as First Lady of the United States, Melania's life had been a study in contrasts, public and private, visible yet enigmatic. Her choice to speak now, and in the way she did, felt less like a departure and more like an evolution. Behind the scenes, those closest to her described a woman deeply reflective, someone who had spent years carefully observing the world around her. Melania's inner circle was tight, her trust hard-earned and rarely given. Yet those who knew her best painted a picture of someone who was far more complex than the caricature often portrayed in the media. She's always been someone who values substance over spectacle, a longtime friend shared. When she chooses to speak, it's because she has something to say, not because she wants attention. This perspective added a new layer to her speech, one that resonated with many who had previously dismissed her as aloof or disinterested. Her emphasis on unity and resilience wasn't just political rhetoric, it reflected a worldview shaped by her own experiences. Having grown up in a small town in what was then Yugoslavia, Melania had witnessed firsthand the effects of political upheaval and social change. These formative years, combined with her later experiences in the United States, gave her a unique perspective on the challenges facing the nation. But while her past provided context, it was her present that held the most intrigue. By stepping into the spotlight on her own terms, Melania had effectively rewritten the narrative surrounding her. No longer was she merely an accessory to her husband's ambitions. She was a figure of her own making, commanding attention not because of who she was married to, but because of what she had to say. This shift wasn't without its challenges. The public and media scrutiny that followed her speech was as intense as it was immediate. Every gesture, every word, every nuance of her delivery was analyzed, debated, and critiqued. Yet through it all, Melania remained steadfast. There were no follow-up interviews, no clarifications or defenses. Her decision to let the speech stand on its own was both a testament to her confidence and a strategic move that only deepened the intrigue. For her supporters, this approach was nothing short of inspiring. They saw in her a figure of quiet strength, someone who exemplified the idea that true power doesn't always need to announce itself loudly. Her speech became a rallying point for those who believed in the values she articulated: resilience, unity, and the importance of personal integrity. Among her critics, however, the reactions were more mixed. While some acknowledged the authenticity of her words, others remained skeptical of her motives. Was this truly a reflection of her own beliefs, or was it part of a larger campaign strategy? The timing of her speech, so close to the election, left room for doubt, and many questioned whether her newfound visibility was as independent as it appeared. These debates, though polarizing, only underscored the broader impact of her reemergence. In a world where public figures are often defined by their personas rather than their actions, Melania had managed to blur the lines. She was at once a political figure and a private individual, a public speaker and a reluctant participant in the spotlight. This duality made her both compelling and confounding, a figure who refused to fit neatly into any one category. As the weeks passed, the focus began to shift from the speech itself to its implications. Within political circles, there was growing recognition of the role Melania could play in shaping the campaign's narrative. Her ability to connect with audiences on a personal level, combined with her unique perspective as an immigrant and former First Lady, gave her a relatability that few other figures could match. For a campaign often criticized for its polarizing rhetoric, her voice offered a chance to reach voters who might otherwise have tuned out. Yet, even as discussions about her potential role intensified, Melania remained resolutely herself. She didn't seek out the spotlight, nor did she shy away from it when it came her way. This balance, deliberate or not, became a defining feature of her public image. To many, it was a refreshing departure from the performative nature of modern politics, a reminder that authenticity, even in small doses, can leave a lasting impression. But perhaps the most striking aspect of Melania's transformation was the way it challenged perceptions of what it meant to be a public figure in today's world. In an era dominated by constant visibility and curated personas, her approach was almost radical in its simplicity. By choosing when and how to engage, she had managed to command attention on her own terms, a feat that few in her position could achieve. For those who had long underestimated her, this was a moment of reckoning. Melania Trump was no longer the silent figure standing by her husband's side. She was a woman with her own story to tell, her own perspective to share. And in choosing to share it now, at this pivotal moment, she had not only redefined herself but also reshaped the conversation around her. As her speech continued to echo in the public consciousness, one question remained. What would she do next? Would this be the start of a new chapter, one where her voice became a more prominent force? Or would she retreat once again into the quiet strength that had defined her for so long? Whatever the answer, one thing was certain: Melania Trump had proven that even in silence, her presence could be profoundly felt. And now, with her voice added to the mix, the possibilities were endless. As the weeks unfolded, the conversation around Melania Trump's speech began to shift. What had initially been a flurry of reactions, both praise and criticism, was now evolving into a broader dialogue about her role in shaping the narrative of a tumultuous election cycle. The memory of her poised delivery lingered in the public consciousness, sparking debates not only about her message, but also about her ability to influence voters in ways that few others could. Within political circles, her impact was becoming increasingly evident. Campaign strategists closely analyzed polling data, noting subtle but significant changes in key demographics. Suburban women, a group often resistant to polarizing rhetoric, showed signs of warming to the campaign, with many citing Melania's speech as a factor. Among independent voters, her emphasis on unity and resilience resonated, offering a counterbalance to the divisiveness often associated with modern politics. This wasn't a tidal wave of support, but it was a ripple strong enough to draw attention. The campaign itself began to quietly adapt. While Donald Trump continued to dominate the headlines with his characteristic bravado, Melania's influence was felt in more understated ways. Messaging shifted to include themes she had highlighted, with a renewed focus on family, community, and shared values. At rallies and events, her presence, whether physical or symbolic, became a touchstone, a reminder of the quieter strength that many found appealing. Yet, even as her influence grew, Melania remained as enigmatic as ever. She made no further public appearances, choosing instead to let her speech speak for itself. For her supporters, this restraint was a sign of authenticity, a refusal to play into the spectacle of constant media engagement. For her critics, it was a convenient way to avoid scrutiny, a strategic silence that allowed her to sidestep tough questions. Regardless of perspective, her approach reinforced one undeniable truth: Melania Trump had mastered the art of commanding attention by withholding it. The cultural conversation surrounding her speech also took on a life of its own. Essays and opinion pieces explored the implications of her transformation, framing it as a broader commentary on the role of women in the political sphere. Some saw her as a symbol of quiet resilience, a figure who had navigated immense challenges with grace and dignity. Others critiqued this narrative, arguing that her silence during pivotal moments in her husband's presidency made her complicit in the controversies that defined it. These debates, while polarizing, underscored the complexity of her public image, a blend of admiration, skepticism, and curiosity that few public figures could match. For Melania herself, the impact of her reemergence was perhaps most evident in the way it reshaped her legacy. No longer was she solely defined by her role as First Lady or her association with her husband. Instead, she was beginning to carve out a narrative that was uniquely her own, a narrative rooted in her values, experiences, and perspective. This was no small feat in a world that often sought to reduce her to a single dimension. By stepping into the spotlight on her own terms, she had not only reclaimed her voice but also challenged the public to see her as more than just an accessory to someone else's story. This shift was particularly significant in the context of the election. As the campaign entered its final weeks, the stakes couldn't have been higher. Every word, every gesture, every moment was scrutinized for its potential to sway voters. And while Melania's speech was just one moment in a much larger narrative, its impact was undeniable. It had shifted perceptions, sparked conversations, and perhaps most importantly, reminded people that even the most familiar figures could still surprise them. In the end, Melania's speech was about more than just politics. It was about agency, identity, and the power of a single voice to cut through the noise. It was a reminder that sometimes the most profound statements come not from those who shout the loudest, but from those who speak with intention and purpose. For a woman who had spent so much of her public life defined by her silence, this was a transformation that resonated on multiple levels. As the election drew closer, the anticipation around what she might do next only grew. Would she continue to influence the campaign from behind the scenes, or would she step forward again, adding her voice to the critical final stretch? And beyond the election, what would this moment mean for her legacy? Would it mark the beginning of a new chapter, one where her influence extended beyond the political sphere? Or would it be remembered as a singular event, a brief but impactful moment in the ever-evolving story of her public life? For now, those questions remained unanswered. But one thing was certain: Melania Trump had redefined the narrative surrounding her. She had shown the world a version of herself that was thoughtful, composed, and unapologetically authentic. And in doing so, she had not only challenged the assumptions that had long surrounded her, but also reminded us all of the power of a voice used sparingly, yet with purpose. With that, we have reached the end of today's show. If you have come this far with us, be sure to check out other videos on the channel.